Go ahead and get started with our bill hearings today. The first bill hearing we have was House Bill 463. Delegate Johnson, you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and colleagues. For the record, my name is Delegate Andre Johnson. I'm here to testify in support of HB 463, which is a sunset extension for the State Board of Architects. HB 463 was amended a few years ago to reduce the sunset extension from 10 years to 3 years, bringing it out of alignment with the standard practices of sunset extensions in boards overseen by the Maryland Department of Labor. What does the board do? It regulates businesses, investigates complaints against licensed and unlicensed practices. We're asking that the sunset extension be modified and adjusted back to 10 years. I'm asking for a favorable review for HB 463. I have today Commissioner Greg Morgan to answer any subject matter questions you may have in reference to the sunset extension. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and colleagues.
I think we may have a panel of Gregory Morgan, Andrew Fulgenetti, and Sandy Worthman. Is Sandy here? Are you here on information only, or would you like to come? Step forward, please. And what is your name, sir?
Chris Parts.
Could you spell that, please?
P-A-R-T-S, like auto parts.
Outstanding. Okay, Mr. Morgan, you can proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair Wilson, Vice Chair Feldman, and members of this committee. For the record, my name is Greg Morgan. I serve as Commissioner of the Division of Occupational and Professional Licensing in the Maryland Department of Labor. Delegate Johnson did a great job stating why we're here today, so I'm here to answer any questions representing the Maryland Board of Architects. And I'm sorry, Vice Chair Crosby.
That's right, he gets it all. They look a lot alike, he gets it all.
And for the record, just Andrew Fulgenetti, Department of Labor, here to address any questions from the committee. So,
Sir?
Yes, and Chris Parts, AIA Maryland. I'm here on behalf of nearly 2,000 architects across the state of Maryland. We appreciate the support in last year's bill, but unfortunately it did not move forward. And with the sunset July 1st of this year, we certainly have a number of members that are concerned about working both in Maryland and jurisdictions across the state. Just here to remind you of the important work that we do. We're responsible for health, safety, and welfare of the occupants of buildings. 90%, or all of us spend at least 90% of every day in a building. So we're here to make sure that you're safe, whether working, playing, living, or learning. Secondly, we work to make buildings more efficient. Buildings consume nearly 40% of energy generated. While we've made great progress, we're working to make buildings healthier and more efficient. And finally, we're working to be more representative of the communities in which we live and work. Maryland is one of only 15 states and 2 jurisdictions that recognize an alternate path to becoming an architect. While many architects get an accredited college degree, we have members who've made a combination of some formal education and 10 years of work experience to be able to sit for the 6-part architectural exam. Our state board enables these folks to move forward and take the licensing exam, and we encourage you for a favorable vote. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for this wonderfully brief hearing. I think that all my colleagues can, be appreciative of the time that you've given back to their lives. So that's much appreciated, especially for everyone else listening in their hearings. It's all, whatever. We're also being kind to him because it's first bill, but he knows that. I see we have a few questions. It was just a horribly bad joke, guys. I'm sorry. I forgot where everybody makes you think you got questions, but we don't. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, I feel like Ricky Bobby. I don't know what to do with my hands right now.
Well, seeing no legitimate questions, I would say thank you very much again for your economy of words, everyone. Thank you, and thank you, Delegate. Congratulations on getting your first bill out of the way. All right, House Bill 327 has been withdrawn by the sponsor, so we're moving on to House Bill 419. Delegate Smith, I'm sure this will be a brief bill. Is it 419?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, distinguished members of Economic Matters. For the record, my name is Delegate Stephanie Smith, and I'm here to present House Bill 419. And I do want the Chair to know that I do believe brevity is a virtue as I commence. House Bill 419 is a reintroduction of an amended version of Senate Bill 851 from last year that successfully passed the Senate Finance Committee. This bill would explicitly exempt law enforcement agencies from the state prohibition against employers requiring employees or applicants to provide usernames or passwords to personal accounts or services, ensuring that police officer candidates do not harbor any ill feelings that could be detrimental to their ability to perform their duties without bias or prejudice. The Baltimore City Administration, I introduced this bill at their request, worked closely with the leaders in the Senate Finance Committee last year, as well as the Fraternal Order of Police, to produce legislation that's inclusive of a range of opinions and looks forward to having it passed this year. In order to ensure that these rules do not place Baltimore City out of step with the hiring practices statewide, this bill is being pursued as a statewide bill. Overall, the language included in House Bill 419 strikes a balance between the need for law enforcement agencies to gather information during background checks and the importance of protecting an applicant's privacy and personal information. The selection of new police officers plays a key role in the Baltimore City Police Department's goals of achieving its short and long-term goals, following the federal consent decree, restoring community trust, and constitutionally enforcing the laws of Baltimore City and the state of Maryland. An individual's social media account can contain information on an individual's thoughts or on a diversity of subjects, which are protected by free speech, of course, and First Amendment rights. House Bill 419 allows BPD and other law enforcement agencies across the state to review the social media accounts of all applicants, which better positions the agencies to determine that their hires, sworn and civilian, maintain a positive social media persona that does not promote biases or other forms of behaviors not suited for constitutional policing, including racism, domestic violence, inappropriate relationships with known criminals, or other antisocial behaviors. Additionally, this legislation requires the applicant to be present while the social media review is being conducted, provides restrictions on printing selections from the applicant's social media profile and accounts to prohibit against any retention of access to information in order to protect the applicant's personal information and prevent any potential abuse of power by the employer. House Bill 419 will help to increase the Baltimore Police Department's ability to recruit and retain individuals who are best suited to ensure the department is able to fulfill its duty to constitutionally enforce the laws of Baltimore City and the state of Maryland. In conclusion, by passing the legislation statewide, we can also ensure that all police departments in the state of Maryland are recruiting and hiring the best candidates to serve within our law enforcement agencies. And that is the conclusion of my presentation of House Bill 419, and I would like to give an opportunity for the representatives from the city of Baltimore to provide additional context. Thank you for listening today.
And before they begin, I just,
Yes,
because
sir.
I think I'm hearing it correctly, although this is Baltimore presentation, you want this to be a statewide bill.
It would allow any, yes, it'd be a statewide bill allowing any law enforcement agency in the state to be exempted from their prohibition on.
And have the members of any of the law enforcement agencies weighed in beyond Baltimore City?
I introduced this bill at the request of my administration. I would like for them to speak further.
Okay, great. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Chair Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, and members of the committee. Nina Themlis, Interim Director of Government Relations for the Mayor's Office in Baltimore City, here on behalf of the Baltimore City Administration. As far as ongoing conversations with additional police departments throughout other jurisdictions in Maryland, I would defer to the Baltimore Police Department, as they had done a lot of the work last year in getting the bill amended to the point where we're introducing that version this year.
Good afternoon. My name is Erin Murphy. I am the brand new Director of Government Affairs for Baltimore City Police Department. It is my beginning of my third week. So I only know what I've been told about the background of this bill. I know last year we did submit written testimony, which also addresses the paragraph in the consent decree. That was one of the reasons that this came about, as we want to comply with the consent decree, and currently the law doesn't provide us an ability to do so. We We did speak with Chaz Ball, who came down on behalf of FOP last year. In terms of the statewide law enforcement agencies, I am not aware. But I mean, the big problem is I understand their privacy concerns, and I know that that's what came up the last time. But in this particular bill, what is really important and what we worked hard is that these passwords are not retained. It is not a situation where the agency is going to be able to go in at any time and look at a person's social media. This is when a person is hired, they are present, they open their social media. It is a quick review of an applicant's social media, and it's really important because then we're able to ensure that our hires maintain a positive social media presence because, as we know, social media can tell us a lot about a person. Thank you.
Thank you. I, again, would go back to, I guess my curiosity, then why not just make this a local bill? And again, I understand you're new.
Right.
I understand we seem like we have somebody who's presenting on behalf of somebody who's new, but I would ask at some point, because I don't understand why this isn't just a local bill, since I know from my 12 years plus of being up here, anytime there's a sweeping legislation that includes law enforcement, there's usually input from a multitude of agencies. I don't see that here. I don't know if they're even aware this bill exists, so I would ask, why not just Baltimore City?
They are aware that this bill exists. So I suggest that if they really maybe had a very strong opinion otherwise, they would be down here on the opposite side. I've certainly only been down here for 2 weeks, but I've seen plenty of bills that have plenty of people lined up on the other side. And I think what we have to realize is every law enforcement agency should be concerned about the quality of the applicants and what they put on their social media. So I think just because Baltimore City wants to be a forerunner,
I'll say it another way. Yeah. Don't you think it may be a little more successful if it was just narrowly tailored to Baltimore City? It would make it more, the chances of passing may be a little easier if it's narrowly tailored to a local bill.
I can say that the concern that was relayed to me is that we don't want to be at a disadvantage of having policies that are, very different from our surrounding jurisdictions. We're not that big a state as a practical matter. And also I think that one of the things that, was mentioned to me was that these negotiations with the statewide FOP, they weren't with the city FOP, Fraternal Order of Police, sorry, I don't want to speak in acronyms, but they were with the broader state FOP leadership. That was my understanding. So that does encompass many other law enforcement perspectives beyond the city of Baltimore. So I just want to lift that up for your consideration.
So you're not interested in narrowly tailoring this bill? You do want it to be a statewide?
I am here introducing it at the
and
request.
Again, you understand my confusion. I don't feel like I have a person I can question, and I'm not going to obviously batter the witness.
Right.
So we'll have a discussion offline.
Absolutely.
Because I want to see.
I don't want to talk out of turn. That's why I'm only.
Thank you very much.
Saying what I have.
Seeing no questions, I believe that concludes this bill hearing. Thank you guys very much.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Next, we have Delegate Chisholm, House Bill 494.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. With that bright sun behind you, I can't see you, but I'm sure you're still beautiful as always.
It's the halo.
That's right. Members of Economic Matters, for the record, I'm Delegate Brian Chisholm here to present HB 494. It's a right-to-work bill, which is a very straightforward bill that simply would make it illegal to force any potential worker to join a union or pay union dues or fees as a condition of employment in a private sector. Nearly 80% of Marylanders opposed forced unionism, and this bill will guarantee any worker the freedom and flexibility to decide whether or not he or she wanted to join a union if offered by a private company in the state of Maryland. The bill would empower an individual to make a decision that is best for he or she of their own situation. The constitutional guarantee to freedom of association is violated whenever a worker is forced to join a union or pay dues or fees as a condition of employment. Considering the major labor shortage that we hear about every day in all of our committees and throughout the country that are plaguing every industry, we should be removing barriers and roadblocks in an effort to attract more workers to the opportunities available throughout our state and not creating more barriers and discouraging employment. With that, I respectfully ask for a favorable report. And I do have one witness live and in person with me.
Yes. Chairman Wilson, members of the committee. My name is Jace White, and I am the Director of Federal Affairs at the National Right to Work Committee. On behalf of our tens of thousands of members and supporters in Maryland, I am here to to speak in support of HB 494 and the freedom of association it advances. This bill would protect every individual from being compelled to pay union dues or fees in order to work for a living, making Maryland the 28th right to work state. Unfortunately, under current law in Maryland, a union boss can choose to impose monopoly bargaining on workers, taking away an individual's right to negotiate for him or herself. Then, union bosses demand the government enforced authority to extract dues or fees from those unconsenting workers, adding insult to injury. This bill would guarantee workers the right to decide for themselves whether or not a labor union deserves their financial support, as they can for any other private organization. When Fred Comer, the former executive director of the Iowa State Education Association, was asked if he would support a controversial resolution at a national union convention, he said, "Hell no, we don't support it. Iowa's a right-to-work state. We have to earn our membership. If we supported that, we'd lose too many members." You see, without right-to-work protections, there's little incentive for union officials to offer a good service to their members because they can compel people to pay either way. The fact is, good unions don't need forced dues, and bad unions don't deserve them. Furthermore, it's clear that right-to-work would help Maryland's economic outlook. From 2010 to 2020, the percentage growth in the number of people employed was 4.3% in Maryland and 2.4% in all forced unionism states. Right-to-work states, on the other hand, enjoyed employment growth of 11%, more than double Maryland's. That's no surprise because, as PHH Fant has found and others have confirmed, roughly half of businesses automatically rule out relocating or expanding to states that lack a right-to-work law. Furthermore, residents of right-to-work states earn nearly $3,000 more in average cost-of-living adjusted household incomes per year. Clearly, not only is right-to-work the morally right thing to do, but protecting this freedom will also help Maryland's workers and economy. Therefore, I urge all of you to vote to advance House Bill 494.
Good job.
I guess I do have a question. It's my understanding that federal law already precludes individuals being forced to join unions. Is it correct?
You want that one?
They can still be forced to pay union dues.
To be clear, correct, but they're not forced to join a union. They're covered under a collective bargaining agreement or something of that nature. Maybe that protects them. They may be forced to pay union dues, but they are not themselves forced to join a union, correct?
Not as members, but as dues.
So this
paying
really
dues.
isn't about joining a union. It's about whether they want to pay dues or not.
Correct.
It's about keeping them from being forced to pay dues.
Right, but they're not forced to join a union. You're not forced to participate or join a union. It's just they may be forced under certain circumstances with collective bargaining agreements to pay dues, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, we'll move to the unfavorables. We have Donna Edwards and Gerald Jackson. Is that it?
I just want to,
Usually when we start, you automatically start talking wherever we see each other, so
well, I'll tell you, I swear. Good afternoon and happy Valentine's Day. And thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. This is my inaugural testimony. I'm going to try to get it all in 2 minutes, and I'll do my best. Thank you very much for this present on Valentine's Day. You have several testimonies, in fact, dozens, that will give you all of the facts on what's not right about right to work. It's a very clever bargaining or branding type of thing to say right to work. It does not guarantee anybody a job. All of the universities, the think tanks, whether they're on the right, the left, or in between, as well as Wall Street economists have all said that workers do best when there is unions, workers move forward when there are unions, and the states that still have right to work, the workers are doing worse. So let's be honest. The strongest, most important organized institution in this country for workers is the AFL-CIO. The state federations in all 50 states and Guam and Puerto Rico, we are there to protect workers. Through our ability to fight oppression of workers, and with our allies, we fight oppression of voters, of people of color, of women, of all people who laugh, look, love differently than other people. We protect all of those rights. And right to work doesn't do anything to protect or move forward workers at any point in time. Even Jim Justice of West Virginia said it didn't happen. They did right to work. They got rid of prevailing wage. And he's even quoted as saying, they didn't come. They didn't build it. So what I'm saying to you is unions are workers. We're not entities. We're not something that comes in and swoops over workers. Workers decide that they want a union. All I'm saying is workers built this country and the unions built the middle class. Please give an unfavorable to House Bill 494.
Thank you, Donna. You always use every second of your allotted time. So
I thank you. And I try to sneak in others.
I saw you. Thank you very much. Next, we have Gerald Jackson.
Okay. Chairman Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, committee members, my name is Gerald Jackson. I'm the Secretary Treasurer for the Maryland State and DC AFL-CIO. I'm also the Assistant Business Manager for the Plumbers and Steamfitters Local 486 in Baltimore and a 42-year member of the same. And I strongly oppose House Bill 494. There are many reasons that I oppose right to work. Misleadingly named right to work laws do not, as some unfamiliar with the term may assume, entail any guarantee of employment for people who are ready and willing to work. Let's call it what it is: anti-worker union busting legislation. Right to work laws make it harder for workers' organizations to sustain themselves financially, which undermine unions' bargaining strength. Right to work laws lower wages and benefits, weaken workplace protections, and decrease the likelihood that employers will be required to negotiate with their employees. Proponents of right to work feel that this strategy attracts new business to a state, but EPI research shows that right to work laws do not have any positive impact on job growth. Corporate lobbies advocate for right to work laws not to create or give workers more freedom, but to restrict unionization and make it harder for workers to have an effective voice in negotiating with their employer. Under federal law, unions are required to represent every employee covered by a union contract. In right to work states, this practice means providing expensive benefits to many workers who have not paid their fair share. Non-members in a collective bargaining unit get all that unions secure through the bargaining process. For example, if a non-dues paying employee has a problem at work, the union is required to represent them, including attorney fees, if warranted, at no charge to the employee being defended. Moreover, my strongest opposition to right to work is based on the origins of the right to work movement. Vance Muse, known as the father of right to work, was a degenerate political operative who sought to maintain the social construct of the segregated South and Jim Crowism. He saw that unionism galvanized working people, regardless of ethnicity and religious distinction. He was opposed to women's suffrage, child labor laws, and the 8-hour workday. Conspicuously speaking, I am in no way suggesting that the sponsors of this bill are congruent with the ideologies of Vance Muse. Nevertheless, legislation whose origins are divisive in motive, preying on a period of racial enmity, has no place in the laws and statutes of Maryland. Thank you for allowing me to give my testimony, and I ask for an unfavorable opinion for House Bill 494.
Thank you very much, sir. I see him.
My friend.
Seeing one question, Delegate Fisher.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the spirit, I guess Delegate Chisholm brought back Delegate Warren Miller's bill from the depths of the ocean. Sorry? And Delegate Pipke, okay. So my question is, I guess there's a fee that you still have to pay if you decide not to join the union. Is that correct?
No, that's not.
There's no representation
Janice did away
fee?
with that in the public, and we don't have that kind of system in the private. And it's not saying that if a worker comes into...
So, I mean, the teachers union has that. I mean, you still have, if you choose not to belong, you still have to pay a representation fee. That's true.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So that doesn't exist with all the unions? It
No.
only exists with the teachers union?
Yeah.
There's no other union that it requires it?
To my knowledge, no. And it wouldn't be Valentine's Day without you.
That's not my understanding.
Really?
Yeah, my understanding is that If you choose not to join the union, there's still a representation fee that you must pay, and on behalf of the union, who then represents you to negotiate the contract.
My question would be, why would you think that you shouldn't pay to get the raises, the benefits, the retirement, the grievance procedure, and the thousands of dollars that the union pays? So I think a fee is appropriate, and I really think Janice was wrong.
Donna, I appreciate that. I do, and you know, I always enjoy when you're here. And it really does go to the crux of the matter, which is, and this comes from a guy who's the grandson of 4 Teamsters. Who ultimately, by the way, the Teamsters at the time, you know, stole the pension that my grandfather and his 3 children did not get. But notwithstanding that, it goes to the crux of the matter, which is, and this is a question, what is the problem with people being free to not join and not pay for things that may be used against their will, such as the representation fee, which they may not agree with. They may not agree with the stances of the union or so forth, but they really love the job that they want to have in the union, which represents a lot of people in my county. They love what they do.
You know,
they're in the union, but they don't necessarily agree with pretty much a lot of what the union does.
And I would just compare that to taxpayers who live in areas where they might not be the majority that won, but they are still paying the taxes of the county and the city that is, you know, led by a whole group of people that they don't support, but they still pay for the benefits that they get.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Seeing no further questions.
Mr. Chair.
Seeing no further,
I love
sorry, apologize. Steve, we do have another question.
I guess you guys made a couple statements that I kind of understand, but I disagree with. If I am out of work and I walk over, say, to the building next door where they're trying to build a building, most of that's done by union workers, am I correct? Most of our work is done with unions.
Is this about, if it's about trades, I'm going to let Gerald have it.
That's fine. It's just a general question.
I don't think that most of our work is done by unions, even though I would like it to be.
Okay, let's say I go onto a site where it's a union job and
Right.
maybe steam fitters or whatever. And I'm not a steam fitter, but I can do these jobs. I can do a lot of the work myself, and I've done that in my career. I cannot walk to that place and get a job, even if you need people. I can't walk on site and say, hey, I see you need somebody to do that. Will you hire me today to do that? You won't do that. Am I correct?
I will.
You will?
And what I will do is hire you on a probationary time. I need to make sure that you have the skills of the rest of my working membership, and then I will bring you into the union.
Okay. But I have to join a union to continue with that. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you mean? Or?
Eventually, you will have to.
Okay. The other thing is I appreciate the fact what unions do and what they have done in the past about protecting me, but we go through a plethora of bills in this committee talking about protecting workers, not just union workers, workers, period.
All workers.
So I would just like to understand a little bit more. Maybe I don't even understand it. I see what you're saying, but we're doing that already. We don't necessarily, the legislator protects the workers, the AG office. We have a lot of mechanisms as far as the government to do that. So I appreciate that, and I think that's why this bill makes a little bit of sense. I don't necessarily need the union for that any longer. You guys do a good job at it for your union people, but as far as overall workers, I don't need that. The state's taking care of them, and this is an exception. So I kind of support the bill from that matter, that I can now go get a job wherever I want. I don't have to be a member of a union. I come from a dad who was a union member. He was an operating engineer, and he picked the bad political side. So guess who could never be an operating engineer? And I took the test several times. Maybe I was stupid. I doubt that because I think I've done pretty well. But I just submit that, we ought to open this up and consider it a little bit more. You guys do a good job. You have a niche, but it isn't the end all, in my opinion, for workers, especially in a time when we don't have enough employees to go around. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, I love that we got that question. I was wondering where the question might be.
I'm sorry if I
So,
didn't get to
no,
it.
that's
enough for you.
fine,
I
Delegate.
don't believe there's a question poised. Now, I say that just for a matter of time.
Thank you.
Wouldn't you agree?
Okay, you said, would you agree? And she hopefully answered it.
Of course I don't agree.
Correct. So I just don't want to drag this out. I think you guys have done a wonderful job presenting. I think you've gotten your ideas across. I don't think there are any more questions. And I know we have to move on. Other individuals do have bill hearings, so they'd like to get their bills through. So I would.
May I ask, and because of time, we limited our panel.
Yes,
And
you
may
are.
I just ask that the people who are opposed to this bill stand up?
Please, anybody opposed to this bill, please stand up.
Thank
Really?
you, sir.
Thank you guys
Thank
very
you,
much. And
committee.
ma'am,
Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, thank you for your presentation. House Bill 414. Who's presenting? Delegate Weibel, is that, did you have another bill in another committee?
Yes, but it's later.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're doing this in a timely manner for you, bud.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, and colleagues. I'm Delegate Weibel, here to present House Bill 414, Washington County Electricians Registration and Licensing. The bill is actually intended to be a local bill requested unanimously by Washington County Board of Commissioners. Its intent is to conform the language to the changes made in state law a few years ago and to grant authority to the local governing body. As introduced, there is a lot of opposition to the bill as it is perceived as creating a special class of license, a restricted electrician at the local level. That is current practice, however, and it is the intent of the local governing body to continue to license and regulate low voltage contractors. I understand the need and desire to create statewide uniformity in the licensing and regulation of this trade and had asked our county attorney to propose an amendment. He did do that and provided an amendment to clarify that the local board is to adopt rules and regulations for the examination and licensing of restricted electricians and the registering of master electricians. I'm not sure, however, that this amendment goes far enough to satisfy the opposition, as I believe they desire for any further licensing and registration of low voltage contractors or restricted licenses to also be uniform at the state level. I agree. Therefore, if further amendments are necessary to totally remove references to licensing and registration of restricted electricians, I can again have that conversation with our Board of County Commissioners to ascertain if they're in agreement and work with the subcommittee to resolve any outstanding issues. Having said that, I ask for a favorable report with amendments on House Bill 414, and thank you in advance for your consideration.
And you do not have a panel, sir?
I do not. It was supposed to be a simple local bill.
All right, I believe we have Kevin O'Keefe, who is here favorable with amendments. Why don't I have it? Okay, no, here it is. And go ahead, sir, and then we'll get to the favorable. I apologize, I missed it.
Good afternoon, Chairman Wilson, members of the committee. My name is Kevin O'Keefe, here on behalf of the Independent Electrical Contractors Chesapeake. As we were here last week, as this is a follow-up to the electrician licensing bill that you passed 2 years ago. And as Delegate Weibel said, we support with the amendments that would strike the examination and licensing of restricted electricians, because we don't think it's good to go down the path of creating a piecemeal approach to limited low voltage licensing. And even though they have the ability to do that right now in Washington County, the way the bill on page 2, lines 31 and 32 was drafted, it makes it appear like they are creating a new low voltage license. For that reason, we would support with amendments that would take out the language creating this low voltage license, limited restricted license. Thank you.
Appreciate your testimony. Seeing no questions, I will again call. Do we have Dawn Marcus on virtual? Seeing none, we'll move on to our, you guys, thank you very much. We have an unfavorable, Tom Clark.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tom Clark. I represent the International Brotherhood of Electric Workers, Local 26, and I'm here also speaking for our sister union, 307, which is in Washington County. My problem with this bill is that a restricted electrician, we have a master, we have a journey person, and we have an apprentice. And like the delegate said, he was looking for a restricted license, but nowhere does it say in the bill about low voltage. That's where I think they're going after there, the low voltage electrician. The amendments are great, but if you put those amendments in, you now have the Maryland Electricians Act, which this committee has dealt with for like 9-10 years. We finally passed it 2 years ago, and we're fine-tuning it now. But so I'd be fine with the amendments, but like I said, with the amendments, we have the Maryland Electrician Act. But other than that, I appreciate your time, and I ask for an unfavorable vote on this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. See no questions. I believe that concludes that hearing. Moving on to sixth bill for the day, Delegate Foley, House Bill 349.
Hello, Mr. Chair. Delegate Foley is in another bill hearing right now. I am Petra Smeltzer, and I'm her Chief of Staff, and she's asked me to present testimony on her behalf, if that is okay with you, sir. Okay, thank you very much.
And do you have a panel that or do you know? If you have a panel you'd like to call, if you don't, I'll deal with it.
Yes, yes, I do. I know at least one person is here.
Okay, and they'll introduce themselves when it's their time to speak. And hopefully they'll smile as they sit down instead of looking surly, super surly. Thank you.
Savage. Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm representing Delegate Linda Foley of District 15, and we're here to present HB 349, the Maryland Fair Scheduling Act. This would establish more predictable scheduling for hourly shift workers who are employed by food and retail establishments that are part of a chain or franchise of at least 10 establishments nationwide. The bill sets forth requirements and conditions for employee compensation and protections from last-minute changes in shift schedules. It allows employees to decline work hours that occur during the 11 hours following the end of a shift, and it includes anti-retaliation protections if the scheduling rights provisions are violated. The record-keeping requirements of the bill rely on records already mandated by the Maryland Department of Labor and the U.S. Department of Labor. The primary purpose of this bill is to deter erratic scheduling and provide hourly employees of these food and retail establishments with predictable work hours. This is essential to provide structure to the workers' own lives and the lives of those who are dependent upon them, such as their children and elderly parents who require caretaking. Far more stringent, fair workweek laws and ordinances than this bill exist in at least 9 states: California, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island, and Vermont. And to be clear, HB 349 does not require advance notice of regular scheduling. It does not mandate that an employer guarantee any schedule, nor does it provide terms for posting a schedule in advance. It merely requires employers to give adequate notice of changes to the work schedule and protects workers from retaliation from employers for declining to work hours not included in an original schedule. Workers and employers are free to mutually agree to change scheduled hours at any time, but the law would protect an unexpected last-minute change from being implemented unilaterally by the boss. Employees often are placed on a standby mode or on-call in case they are needed to cover shifts not worked by other scheduled employees. Workers who are placed on standby and called into unscheduled shifts must arrange for additional child care and transportation. Class schedules, second jobs, and household budgets also can be impacted. HB 349 ensures that employees of franchise establishments be guaranteed a minimum of 4 hours pay for such on-call shifts. The bill also provides employees the right to decline work hours that occur less than 11 hours after the end of a worked shift. Employers would have to compensate employees at 1.5 times their regular rate of pay for any hours worked by their regular pay. This bill does not make unreasonable demands on large retailers. For example, Starbucks decided back in 2014 to post work schedules in advance and provide store employees with more consistent schedules from week to week. If Starbucks can adopt such a practice, other retail franchises should be able to do so as well. I note that the requirements under HB 349 are far less rigorous than the scheduling policy Starbucks has adopted. Erratic schedules are especially difficult for women workers who compose a large majority of the hourly workforce. Not having a predictable schedule drives some others out of the workforce because it is too expensive for them to arrange for last-minute transportation and childcare. Consistent work scheduling fosters better health for employees. Providing employees with a sensible break between shifts allows time for sleep, commuting, and to care for oneself and one's family. For many hourly workers, schedule unpredictability leads to adverse health effects. Growing scientific literature links job stress to poor health. Researchers also are increasingly linking poor worker health to poor economic outcomes, such as, and I'm almost done, lower productivity and slower business growth. As a result, it is not surprising that recent studies establish a positive relationship between fair-minded workplace arrangements and worker health. For all these reasons, Delegate Foley urges a favorable report on House Bill 349. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. You did a wonderful job with your presentation. Next, I believe we have Ms. Kayla Mock.
Good afternoon, Chairman Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, members of the House Economic Matters Committee. Happy Valentine's Day. My name is Kayla Mock. I'm with the United Food and Commercial Workers Union Local 400. We represent over 10,000 members in Maryland who have worked on the front lines and have been essential workers in grocery, retail, food distribution, law enforcement, and healthcare. Through collective bargaining, our members raise workplace standards of wages, benefits, safety, and retirement for all workers. And we appreciate the sponsor and the proxy for bringing forward this legislation that would improve the working conditions of all Marylanders. In a study published by the Peterson Institute for International Economics, which they analyzed the evolution of the labor market over the last year, they stated, while talk of the Great Resignation may leave the impression that employment is surprisingly low, that is not the case. Since last December, the economy has added over an average of 555,000 jobs per month, about the monthly pace expected by the Survey of Professional Forecasters and forecasts published earlier this year. This is a result of two offsetting factors. The demand for labor increased much more rapidly, but at the same time, the supply of labor has disappointed, as evidenced by the continued low level of labor force participation. Low level of labor force participation. Workers across America are leaving their jobs in record numbers. Anecdotal reports that workers from waitstaff to healthcare, our teachers are frustrated by low wages, irregular hours, or difficult, unsafe working conditions. I also want to state that this is not a radical idea. Most of our union contracts have fair scheduling in them. I myself worked under these for 12 years at Giant. My mom has been a Giant food worker for 40 years, not just because of the benefits and the wages, simply because she had access to fair scheduling that allowed her to care for 3 children. It's simple. It's good for businesses. It has stability in it. So therefore, we urge a favorable report.
Donna Edwards, President of the Maryland State and DC AFL-CIO. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. You have our written testimony. I just want to add, because the sponsor and the proxy and Kayla's done an excellent job. I did a lot of research in looking into what is going on in the industry right now. As you've heard, this is limited to those that have 10 retail shops or restaurants, establishments. It's not our small business. It's not our mom and pops. And I found that this is a whole new industry out there on predictive scheduling tools. The restaurants and retail are now being able to use predictive tools that say when they're going to have customers, when people are going to, when it's the rush hours, when it's people coming, so that they can predict not only what they need to have in stock or ready to serve, but they could predict when they need workers. So it's not an onerous, it's not something that's not already out there, and it's already being considered, as you've heard, in several states, but it's also coming to North Carolina, West Virginia, and all of the tools and all of the restaurant and retail that I read about, they're telling people, get ready, this is coming, and they're preparing for it. So please give this a favorable report for HB 349. It's time for Maryland to move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, this panel can go.
Thank you.
I believe we have one more favorable, virtual, Christopher Meyer.
Thank you, Chair Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, and members of the committee. My name is Christopher Meyer. I'm a research analyst at the Maryland Center on Economic Policy. We're a nonpartisan, nonprofit think tank that works to advance equitably shared prosperity in Maryland. We strongly support House Bill 349 because it would guarantee workers in the chain, food service, and retail industries a basic level of stability in their schedules, better enabling them to meet family obligations, plan for the future, and advance their careers. It also has potential to help businesses attract and retain talent. Who are covered workers? 73% of part-time workers in these industries are at least 20 years old, and in fact, 19% are over 50. 59% of these workers are women, and half are workers of color. 29% have family income less than the federal poverty line, and 21% are caring for children. This bill would make a major difference. Having a basic level of predictability is essential for workers who have to juggle multiple jobs to keep up with rising prices and rising rents, or who are trying to move their careers forward through education. Many workers are struggling to find childcare. That's even harder if you can't predict when you'll need it, and more unaffordable when you can't count on getting paid for the hours you're paying for. Workers are dealing with extreme levels of stress and often long-term health impacts of COVID-19. Adequate rest between shifts is essential for workers to take care of their bodies. What doesn't this bill do? It does not preclude arrangements that offer more flexibility to workers, and it does not prohibit workers from initiating schedule changes, period. All it does is place limits on the changes bosses can make unilaterally. That's the least workers can ask for. Thank you, and I respectfully ask for a favorable report.
Thank you very much, sir. Seeing no questions, we'll move on to the unfavorables. We have Mike O'Halloran, Ellen Valentino, Kaylee Locklear, Kirk McCauley. Melvin Thompson, are you here? Come on in.
Thank you. Apologies, Melvin and I are running back and forth between another committee.
No worries.
There he is. Okay. Mr. Chair, honorable members of the committee, for the record, Kaylee Locklear here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Association, respectfully in opposition to this bill. A little out of breath from running, so I'm going to breathe for a second. The ability to schedule in response to peak seasons, economic conditions, employee issues or sickness, weather, or public events is essential when running a retail business. Many times, schedule changes are necessary, and by mandating that retailers cannot make needed changes or incur a pay penalty will severely impact scheduling. For our industry, a schedule that is posted too far in advance does not take into account all of the factors necessary to create an accurate schedule, and companies may be forced to release a baseline schedule for limited hours, i.e. the lowest number of hours possible to keep the business open. From there, as business inputs are known, I referenced a couple of them, truck arrival, there are a million things that go into this. Hours will be added, and employees will need to pick up those hours on an ad hoc basis. The rigid scheduling requirements in this bill ignores the employees who choose jobs because of flexible scheduling. It also ignores the differences in how businesses operate. The unique scheduling flexibility in retail jobs our industry offers helps individuals balance important priorities in their lives, such as going to school, working another job, or raising a family. And reading through this bill, and I hope folks have really taken a look at it, it's so prescriptive that if you needed somebody to pick up a shift, that employer cannot even say out loud to other employees, we have a shift opening if anybody's interested. Or if you have an employee who has said, hey, I can work Fridays, there's a shift that becomes open all of a sudden. that employer cannot even inform the employees or they incur these pay penalties. So with that, I will urge an unfavorable report, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Melvin Thompson, representing the Restaurant Association of Maryland, and we're also strongly opposed to this legislation. Many employees choose to work in the food service industry because of our flexible scheduling policies, and the restrictions proposed by this legislation would simply be unworkable for the restaurant industry because we schedule employees according to customer volume, which is subject to change in the food service business. When traffic slows with our customers, which can happen for various reasons and at any time, restaurants cannot afford to pay employees for shifts during times when there's not enough customer revenue to cover those labor costs. The nature of the food service business requires employers to schedule accordingly and to adjust as needed. And employees who prefer more predictable work schedules typically find employment in other business sectors. And this legislation, as Kaylee mentioned, also includes some additional and burdensome record-keeping and documentation requirements. And as the fiscal note mentioned, this bill could also cause some misunderstandings regarding shift changes. And for those and other reasons, we oppose this legislation and request an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Chairman, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kirk McCauley. I represent WMDA, which is service stations, convenience stores, and repair facilities. And HB 349 does take away all flexibility of the employer. And it also takes away the flexibility of an employee that might want to work, again, within 11 hours of his last shift, and get his time in quickly. Maybe he wants to only work 4 days. Get 40 hours in 4 days, give them a 3-day holiday. I think there's a bill in this committee today that is looking at that. So that flexibility means a lot to employees to be able to work at schedule like that. I know of none of my members that have a required standby. That's a whole different story, but I just know that this bill takes away all flexibility, creates animosity between employer and employee, and it's very can be misunderstood very easily. I think Melvin said, look at the physical notes and the different aspects of it. Even the physical notes say it's a very confusing bill, and the penalties in this bill, the right of private action, rebuttal presumption, court fees, attorney fees. That's absolutely ridiculous, to tell the truth. Our members are just getting over the fact that family and sick leave is coming in. It's going to cost them a lot of money. It looks like we might get a minimum wage this year ahead of schedule. It's time to let small business breathe a little bit. Let them run their business. Thank you, and I would like an unfavorable report on 349. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the House Economic Matters Committee. For the record, my name is Mike O'Halloran, here today representing NFIB. Happy Pitchers and Catchers Report Day for those who celebrate. I'm here in respectful opposition to House Bill 349, a simple me too. And I'd also like to point out the proponents would have you believe that this is just for those big trademark businesses. But keep in mind that franchisees are small businesses. I would imagine many of you have them not only in your districts, but perhaps some of you even worked at some of these growing up, particularly in our restaurant and hospitality industries, retail as well. I can think of Ace Hardwares off the top of my head as one such company that operates a franchise agreement, and those that operate in your districts under those names are, in fact, small mom and pop businesses. So again, appreciate an unfavorable report and welcome any questions. Thank you.
Delegate Adams.
Question. You know, a few years back we passed the Healthy Working Families Act, which gives people time off as needed with pay, without advance notification. And so what is a business to do then when you have to fill the schedule when somebody or somebodies have to leave, and yet you've still got to run a business? How do you, with this bill, how do you mesh this policy with what we've already passed?
It would make it very difficult. A lot of my businesses are 24/7, and it would make it almost impossible to run an efficient business.
Thank you.
All right, Delegate Sample Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today and sharing your dismay with the bill. So this isn't the first year that this bill has been introduced, and I heard from the previous panel that there are some restaurants and some other establishments that have the best practices or some type of software that's been put in place to do the scheduling. So with that being said, have you at any point, since this piece of legislation has been introduced many, many times, looked into any of those software devices to help with the scheduling and predictability?
I'm aware of them. I think a lot of operators, frankly, I think it's just a matter of preference for each individual business, and I think that's a key, I think, to whether it's, say, this discussion per se, or a lot of the issues that will come before this committee in particular. I think that business owner who's, taking the time, the capital invested in his or her company, they're going to make sure that they have employees to staff the shifts, they have customers to come in that they can serve. So they're going to do the best thing to operate their business. So as far as scheduling software, look, I know restaurants right here in town, some of which probably about a 10 tables, and they use the software. I know of other businesses right here in town that have 25, 30 tops, and they do it a much more laissez-faire kind of way. You heard from my colleague from the retailers. I grew up in the restaurant industry. I worked, I bartended, I waited tables. I beg my wife every week if I can go back to bartending and waiting tables. But the fact is, under this bill, the old corkboard that we used to put up in the back of the house that said, hey, shifts are open, or when our shift manager would come out and say, hey, I got Friday PM open, who's going to take it? Under this bill, that restaurant owner, that store owner is now subject to, treble damages, complaints, interferences from the Commissioner of Labor and Industry, and they're just trying to operate their business. So it's a roundabout way, Delegate, I apologize, that is my MO. Yes, store owners have this technology, they have the opportunity to utilize it, but it's also for benefit of employees as well.
Okay, so what I heard you said is that there are some software that is available, or is some software that's available that could potentially be adaptable to your industry as well.
I would imagine there is, sure.
Sure, okay. I was just curious if you had already done the research.
And the software, the only thing it does is look at your books and your business as a whole and give you the times that you're busy. I mean, basically that's all it does, and how many people you need. So that ahead of time. It's not like you make it every day. So it shouldn't be. I don't know of any of my members that have that, but that's basically what it does.
So you could adjust if necessary. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here today. So in just a quick look at the job market, I work in recruiting in my normal life. Just a quick look at Indeed, Glassdoor, any of these websites. There are a lot of jobs and a lot of competition for good workers. Would you say that's correct?
I would absolutely say that's correct. In fact, our NFIB's jobs report just came out last week, and I want to say we're still at a 48-year high in terms of employers, small business owners looking for employees and still not being able to fill these positions. So they're out there hiring.
Yeah, me too. That's our number one
For your industry as
concern of all 800 members is employees.
So there's really no incentive to be a bad actor, a bad employer, and to treat valuable employees poorly. Would you say that's correct as well?
I would agree.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I just want to level set a little bit. We hear words like the industry and, Starbucks, but the reality is, at least in my interpretation, I want to see if you agree with it, talks about 10 retail locations, 10 restaurants. These are like hot dog stands. Seriously, this is somebody with 10 hot dog stands, and they're going to utilize AI and deep learning for scheduling. Is that, am I off base here? We're talking about pop-up farm stands
as I mentioned, just anecdotally, you know, I grew up working in restaurants. Some of them are trademark names that have, you know, well over 10 nationwide chains. And I can tell you from experience, they are not using AI to schedule or take stock so that they have their food product ready for, you know, when a Friday night slam hits before the 8 o'clock movie. They just do not have it.
I just wanted to
Some
get,
do. I'm not
Yeah.
saying they don't, but I don't think it's as widespread, particularly for these small mom and pop franchisees.
I just wanted to get some sense, you know, we use these big, broad, general terms, like everything's Acme Corporation, and the reality is that it's just far from it, so.
No, it's a lot of my members have Subways with inside their convenience stores, but they're just an individual. It's Subways nationwide, but they're a franchisee for that one store. So, yes, they do have a nationwide franchise, but that's their one business. So.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no other questions, this concludes the bill hearing. Next up, and the last bill of the day, is HB 181. We do have the analyst here. This is jointly assigned with Ways and Means. We do expect delegates Charles, Hartman, and actually probably not Hartman as his grandson was born, but Wells to be coming over from the committee, but we'll go ahead and get started.
Could I bring my panelist up?
Go ahead.
Thank you.
And does that include the news, Delegate Stewart?
Say that again?
Does that include the news?
I had to depart. Withdraw. What's up?
Oh, okay. And you can start whenever you're ready.
Thanks for coming. I know it was a tough night. All right, Mr. Acting Chair, members of the committee, for the record, I'm Delegate Von Stewart. This is House Bill 181. So I've got, again, good news and bad news for y'all this afternoon. So the bad news is, here's the count. I still have one more bill hearing before this committee. The good news is it's March 9th. So y'all have more than 3 weeks to recover from today before you have to see me again. And exactly. So y'all may remember last time I started out with a bill from Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida. And today, here this afternoon, I am here to fulfill the dream of former President Richard Nixon. He said in 1956 that a shift to a 4-day work week would occur in 1956 in the not too distant future. That didn't really pan out. But he did say that eventually current projections suggest that it was not an idle boast, quote unquote, or a distant dream, but that we would have a shortened work week because of increased productivity. Since that time, since 1956, productivity among American workers has increased 434 percentage points. We actually workers can do about the same amount of work in 40 hours now, 40 hours then that they can do in 10 hours now, 1956 versus today. So we have today, in HB 81, the bill before you, is a fundamentally pro-business bill. And I know that the bill title, the 4-Day Workweek Act, may seem exotic or utopian or provocative, but I'm asking you and I'm requesting that you please abandon any preconceived notions you may have about the bill and what it does, because I do have some sponsor amendments that tweak it a little bit. And with them, and at the end of the hearing, I hope to convince you that what may sound exotic and provocative and utopian is in fact profoundly practical and even mundane. So HB 181 would create a 5-year pilot project to provide tax credits and technical assistance to companies willing to experiment with shortening the work week for their workers without reducing pay or benefits. The companies would need to shorten the work week from 40 hours a week to 32 hours a week without reducing pay and benefits, and their tax credits would be capped with the sponsor amendment at $10,000. The total amount of the tax credits in the bill is $750,000, but if fewer than 75 companies applied, so 750,000 divided by 10,000, if fewer than 75 applied for the program, those funds would essentially lapse and revert back to the general fund at the end of the 5-year pilot project. The technical assistance provided to the companies would be performed by the Department of Labor, and the department would also be asked to study the feasibility of reduced work hours for public sector workers. The impetus for this bill, and you'll hear more about this study later, but basically throughout 2022, there was a study done by an organization called the 4-Day Week Global Foundation. You're going to hear from one of their representatives. They looked at over 30 companies with over 900 employees throughout 2022 in North America and Ireland that shorten work weeks from 40 to 32 hours. And their results were honestly stunning. So the part that you can probably surmise or predict is that 97% of employees like this. 97% of employees wanted the trial to continue. But what really shocked me and ultimately led me to put in this bill is that the employers loved it just as much. They rated the program a 9 on a scale of 1 to 10, and they overall reported a profit increase of 8%, and they also reported increased productivity as well. That study is in conjunction to another number of other different businesses that have made this shift outside of the context of a study, including a Baltimore-based company whose CEO is with us today, who you'll hear from, who has made this shift, and will report what a lot of CEOs across the country have said, which is that making the change from a 40-hour to a 32-hour work week has completely changed the game on recruitment and retention. At a time, as y'all have heard all day, that it's tough to get the creme de la creme workers in the door of your company, this has been a game changer in terms of recruitment and also keeping workers there. It's expensive to have employee turnover. It's expensive to lose employees and have to hire new employees. This is something that has saved businesses money because it's reduced turnover and it's improved their recruitment efforts. But the reason for the bill, and people have said, well, why do we need a bill for this? Shouldn't companies already be doing this, or shouldn't we let the market work? A lot of companies are on the fence about this. A lot of companies see what their peers are doing, they see what the studies suggest, but their inertia is a powerful force. They're not sure they can make it work, they have questions. This bill is meant to be a gentle nudge in the direction of doing this, because we think that doing this, according to all the research we do have available, presents a possible win-win-win for the state of Maryland. It can benefit employees by giving them more time off. They can rest more, they can spend more time with their friends and family. I'll probably spend a little bit more time managing my fantasy football team. And it'll give them potentially more, and then potentially more time to just sort of reset and be productive when they do come in the office. It's also a potential win for the employers in Maryland, who can benefit from increased recruitment, retention, and potentially productivity and profits. And finally, we think it's going to be a win for Maryland as a whole, because workers that have shortened work weeks and have more time off are going to have more time to give back to their communities, get involved in their houses of worship, get involved with volunteerism, maybe even get politically involved as well. And so we think that employers are leading this change. We think the change is beneficial, but it needs more study. And this bill was going to be a gentle nudge between a tax credit and a technical assistance, a gentle nudge in the right direction to have more employers take this up and for more Maryland workers to be able to benefit from more time with their friends and family. And with that, I urge a favorable report.
Michelle Siri.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, members of the House Economic Matters Committee. My name is Michelle Siri, and I'm the Executive Director of the Women's Law Center of Maryland. We're a statewide nonprofit law firm with offices in 3 different counties, and we employ 18 proud Marylanders. Here to tell you all that we are here in support of House Bill 181, and that you already may know that currently we have about 49% of workers in Maryland that are women. But did you also know that there was a study in late 2022 that said up to 1/3 of women are currently looking to downshift their careers or leave the workforce altogether, primarily due to the weight of trying to balance caregiving and their employment? So that means in Maryland, we could see a loss of more than 500,000 women in our workforce. That's teachers, that's doctors, lawyers, legislators. Every market will be affected. And so it's paramount that we make structural changes to how we work, or even more women will be forced to the breaking point and out of the workforce. This bill is not a panacea. It is not going to solve all of the issues that we have as employers, but it is a step in the right direction, and it is a carrot. If folks don't want to give their employees those 4-hour or 4-day work weeks, if they perhaps run an operational business that cannot function under that system, or perhaps they just don't want to have something that's an incentive that will make more employees want to join their workforce, they don't have to. That is the beauty of this bill. It's in simplicity of being a carrot and not a stick. And so for all of those reasons, and for all the reasons that the panel will set forth, the Women's Law Center is here to urge a favorable report on House Bill 181. Thank you.
Joe Byrne.
John.
I apologize. John Byrne.
It's okay. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, thank you for having me here today. My name is John Byrne. I'm the CEO of a Baltimore-based software company, Tricert Incorporated. I'm here in support of the 4-Day Workweek Act of 2023 and to share my company's experience with the 4-Day Workweek since its launch in our company in October of 2021. Pandemic fatigue has cripped the modern workforce. Tricert wanted to get ahead of this. I presented the idea of us launching a 4-day work week in early 2021 based on reviewing successful research and pilot programs going on around the world. We launched in Q4. This was natural for us as employee and health and wellness has always been ingrained into our cultural fiber, dating all the way back to the beginning of our company 26 years ago. Overall, we have found this to be a resounding success. Staff has less burnout, less stress, and are much more efficient with their time. Research shows that performance goes up when you are mentally and physically well rested. We can speak to that at Tricert. Sick days are down, productivity is up, and morale is the highest it has ever been. Our research shows that since the implementation of the 4-day work week, that 75% of our staff has an increase in their productivity versus the 5-day work week. 90% of our staff has more time to spend with family and friends. 85% of our staff have a reduction in burnout. 85% of our staff has an increase in overall mental and physical health. Our projected year-over-year growth this year is 15%. So not only have we seen the benefits internally, but our customer satisfaction metrics have also increased. Our Net Promoter Score, or NPS, is stable at 80, which is more than 2.5 times the technology industrial average. This is about much more than giving back free time, which, by the way, everyone deserves the right to have, and I put my support behind the bill.
Stephanie Reed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and committee members. My name is Stephanie Reed. I'm a lifelong resident of Maryland. In fact, I grew up in Delegate Stewart's district, and I've been a state employee for the past 15 years as a clinical social worker. I want to thank Delegate Stewart for introducing House Bill 181, the 4-day workweek pilot program. I remember learning about this concept a few years ago when the first study came out of Iceland. It showed promise then, and the research continues to demonstrate the benefits of adopting this model. The research shows that it increases productivity, reduces business expenses, reduces the carbon footprint, results in happier employees, fewer health issues, and improvements to recruitment and retention. When my spouse and I decided to have children, we both made the decision to cut our work hours so that we could be home more to take care of our kids. I was lucky enough to have my director's support to transition into a part-time 20-hour per week position. I was willing to cut my pay in half to spend that time with my family. Soon after I dropped to part-time, my caseload crept back up to full-time. But I was so appreciative to have the ability to maintain my career and be home with my kids, I didn't really mind doing double the work. Due to the state staffing vacancies, chronic problems with recruitment and retention, low salaries, and antiquated policies, many employees work double the work they were hired to do. Many employees are exhausted and burned out by the volume of work expected from our agencies. The Department of Legislative Services recently published an evaluation of policies to improve the state personnel recruitment and retention. They identified many strategies to improve policies within the state system. Why not add the opportunity for a 4-day work week to the ways we can improve the workforce? I ask for a favorable report for House Bill 181. Thank you.
Thank you. And seeing no questions, well, who's got their, sorry, that's facing me. Delegate Howard.
That's fine, that's fine. Who does this apply to? I mean, what?
So previously, the only limitation on the bill was that you had to have at least 30 employees, but actually NFIB testified. I saw their testimony in the Senate side for the companion bill last week, and they said, among other things, I think they still oppose the bill, but they said it doesn't even apply to small businesses, so they can't support something that doesn't apply to small businesses. We actually added a sponsor amendment to bring that down to 5 employees. So it applies to any business in Maryland that has 5 employees.
But why?
Why does it include?
Why do we need the bill?
Because a lot of employers.
It sounds like an education. I mean, it's all unicorns and pots of gold from what I'm hearing. So,
Sure.
like, why, it sounds like an education issue, not a legislative issue, other than the tax credit and what would be punitive on a small business if they were to eventually not adopt this legislation.
Well, there's no-
if it becomes legislation due to the study. I mean,
Well, there's no punitive nature of the bill. I mean, I don't think, I mean, realistically, I mean, it took us 100 years to move by fiat
I've
from a
been down
6-day
here
work
9
week.
years, and yeah, we'll get there. Don't worry.
Okay, well, maybe you're right, but why do, okay, your question is why do we need the bill, and it sounds like sunshine and rainbows. Yes, it has been sunshine and rainbows. I think that's actually an accurate reflection of the studies that we have available to us so far on the companies that have implemented this. However, there's still hesitation. Not every company thinks that this is right for them. There's, they don't know how to do it necessarily. They don't know how they can do this in a most efficient way. And so we're asking, number one, the Department of Labor to give them technical assistance for companies that are interested in doing this, to help them do so in an efficient and productive way. I mean, the Department of Labor does this for businesses in a number of other different capacities already. It's just assistance to businesses that need it. The tax credit is just meant to offset any losses from the businesses having to survey their employees and share the data with us so that we can collect the data and we can know that if we're going to be providing technical assistance to companies, we want to make sure that we're actually doing something good. We don't want it to be wasteful.
So this would eventually just lead to legislation that mandates a 4-day work week for businesses 5 and above.
I don't think so. I mean, that's certainly not my intention. I mean, I think it could
I know,
lead
but
to a
we're
scaling.
Temporary, man. We got 4-year term. We're temporary, so it might
Sure,
not be
sure.
our intention, but I worry about the next term, or the next termer's intention. And that's
Sure.
what a little
Well,
more
I mean, I can't bind, future legislators, but what I can say is that for right now, I don't think that any jurisdiction in the country has even contemplated the idea of some sort of mandate. I think this is meant to be a carrot approach. It's meant to help businesses that are looking at the future. We want to be supportive of them. I think that we're a long, long way if we ever get the idea of legislating. I mean, it was 1944 the last time that through the Fair Labor Standards Acts, the federal government came in, or any government came in and said this is what the new work week is going to be. I think we're a long way to go from that. I think our conversation here is, do we support businesses who are interested in making the change, or do we not?
So it's just about the tax.
It's tax credit and the technical assistance. I mean, the technical assistance is a crucial piece, right? Because I've heard already from a lot of companies, they're like, hey, I'd love to do this. I've seen what companies like John's have done.
Then they should do it.
I agree, they should do it.
Why with the Treasury? It's always we're always going into the people's Treasury. I mean, I get it.
Well, it's a capped tax credit at $10,000 meant to just offset the costs of them surveying their employees so that we can find out what's going on. But I mean, it could be less than $10,000. That's the cap. We may end up going into the Treasury $250 because it's a simple doodle poll that someone sends to your workers. So it's not. I don't think that this is going to be a huge fiscal price. This is a pro-business bill. It's about businesses are wanting to make a leap that we think will be good for them, for their workers, and for Maryland society. Why shouldn't the Department of Labor help them? Isn't that what the Department of Labor is for? I would argue certainly it's here to help businesses.
Sure, but there's thousands of businesses that are arguably probably already doing this.
Not thousands, no. Nowhere near.
Hundreds. I mean, everybody
Maybe
knows
not.
about the 4-day work week.
I would say
people at NSA are doing this type of stuff.
Well,
Everybody. I mean, this isn't news.
Well, some are doing like a 4-day week with 10 hours, but comparably fewer are going to this kind of gold standard of an actually shortened week. I would say dozens would probably be an overestimate, but that's one reason we want the data is because we simply don't know.
I mean, I'm not trying to, ask you every question, but you talked about productivity is way up. So is demand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that speaks directly to the shortened work week, though. I mean, if productivity is up, would you say 430%? I guarantee you, demand is up beyond that. We have a surplus of goods in the country, so I'm sure demand is up equal to that. How does a shortened work week help us meet demand issues?
Sure. Well, I mean, I would say
that's got to be part of the equation, right?
Sure. So, I mean, I would say that certainly for some companies it may not work, right? But we want to know what kind of companies it works for. It's something that has worked across the blue to white collar spectrum. You've got companies that are sort of service sector, like Shake Shack, that have made this change. But you also have white collar, sort of college educated workforces, like software companies, Kickstarter, for example, Shopify, that have made this change. So I think in terms of demand, if workers' productivity is up, and they're happier, and the profits are up of all these companies, clearly they're meeting demand sufficiently enough. And as John already said, customer satisfaction is clearly up. They're not missing client orders. If anything, it's the reverse.
I mean, we can go on forever, but because there's a demand for software is a lot easier to meet than a demand for widgets.
For sure, and maybe there won't be many widget companies that apply, but that's something we want to see after the 5 years. Are these companies that apply for the technical assistance, are they across Maryland, or is it just Montgomery County and Baltimore City? I'd obviously want a diverse cross-section of the entire workforce. Are they just software companies, or are there widget companies that are doing this? I want to know, and that's why we need the data.
All right, fair enough, thank you.
Thanks.
Delegate, just to kind of piggyback off that, how do we know that the incentive is going to go to companies as a carrot, like new companies who aren't already on the 4-day work week, right? And this is going to incentivize them to take that step versus giving the incentive to people who are already doing it.
It's a line in the bill. I mean, so we contemplate this, and it's a good question. The Department of Labor is instructed under the bill to not give the technical assistance or the tax credit to a single company that has already made this change in any way. It's meant for companies, it's really targeted for companies, certainly not that have already started, but also not for companies that have really never contemplated this at all. It's meant to be a gentle nudge for companies that are they're on the fence. They think that maybe they can make this change, and with a little bit of technical assistance, they could.
Okay. All right, next we'll go to Delegate Fisher.
Wow. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Delegate Stewart, it's $10,000 per employee. Is that the?
No.
The cap?
It's the capped at $10,000 per company.
Per company, okay.
Capped. So it could be $1. It's up to the Department of Labor.
And the minimum number of employees that a company has to have?
Is 5 under a sponsor amendment.
It's 5 employees. Why randomly 5? Why not 1?
Well, I mean, I think that once you have 1 employee, you're getting more into kind of like a closely held, almost like a family sort of business thing. I mean,
what's wrong with that?
Well, if you want to put in an amendment and make it 1 employee.
So you don't have a problem with that?
I mean, I think 1 employee, you're starting to have just sort of like a owner, like a worker-owned business where there's just 1 employee. So that may be a little strange. But if you want to make the case for 3, if you've got like a law firm, for example, I'm a lawyer, so I'm most familiar with that context. If you have like a law firm partner with 2 paralegals and you think that should apply, I'm open to that.
And is there any concern about trying to encourage people and companies to have a 4-day work week, which certainly the gentleman with the business, I guess it's a tech business, it's a private company?
Yes.
Certainly has that right to do because it's a private company. Is there any concern that with the labor participation rate in Maryland being at one of the lowest levels in American history, in Maryland's history, the timing of this bill, we don't have enough people to work now.
Right. I would actually argue the opposite. I mean, as Ms. Siri said.
But Ms. Siri works for a nonprofit, and nonprofits, with all due respect, don't have to answer to really anyone. They just ask for people to give them money. People that actually work in the for-profit businesses.
Without getting into going down the rabbit hole of nonprofits, what I would say is
that's a fact. I mean, really, because what we're really talking about, I know your bill does apply to government and also applies to the private sector. I presume it does apply to nonprofits, but the idea that running a nonprofit is in any way, shape, or form similar to running a for-profit company, it's just apples and oranges.
Okay, sure. And I would note that the study that I mentioned that you're going to hear about, I think one of the virtual witnesses actually helped run the study. 33 companies. I don't think any were nonprofits, as far as I know. They were all private sector companies. So what was your original question? I think I lost it in the whole nonprofit discussion.
The labor the labor participation rate. You were going to
So
you were going to argue that
that
cutting the amount of hours people work is actually going to help the labor participation rate. I think
you should just do the question and answer. You should. So I would watch that.
I'm looking forward to your answer.
I would watch that. I would subscribe to that YouTube channel. So yes, I don't know how you anticipated this, but yes, I would actually argue that this is the best time when you have a shortage of workers. How? This is the optimal time to institute this sort of policy because of the tremendous recruitment advantages that you're seeing the companies do this. It's just an objective fact that after the pandemic, workers left the workforce or became pickier, right, about the jobs they picked. If we want to increase the labor force participation, for having a carrot program like this to provide technical assistance to businesses, I mean, I thought your party was all about helping businesses, right? Tax credits for businesses, and so.
I don't support tax credits, but yeah, that's a general statement that is not applicable. But
so, helping businesses along to make their jobs more attractive to more workers, to me, can only increase the labor force participation rates.
Thank you, Delegate Stewart.
Thanks.
I'm sure we'll hear this in the upcoming podcast episode. Delegate Pippi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to bring up something that I've been thinking about that hasn't been said. So in Annapolis, we do a lot of tax credits. Matter of fact, unlike my colleague down here, I tend to co-sponsor, sign a lot of these tax credits. I actually co-sponsored one with the governor about expanding broadband access.
Right.
I've, co-sponsored things about expanding the purchase of first-time home buyers, tax credits and such.
Right.
But I've never seen a bill where we're going to be subsidizing people to do less.
Well, be in the office less, not do less. Because if you read the studies, you'll see they're actually doing more. Their productivity is up.
So we're going to take, let's just say hypothetically, we're going to take all the people that continue to work 5 days a week. And for the ones that sign up for working 4 days a week, the 5-day-a-week folks are going to subsidize the 4-day-a-week people. And then the other thing that we just witnessed, and again, this is just objectively speaking here, is that, the biggest gripe in my district is that for the folks that own restaurants and retail establishments, once their employees receive those big payouts during the pandemic, the $7,500 a person, the this or that, they've had a really difficult time bringing these workers back. I mean, it's been unbelievably paralyzing to so many businesses to get people in the door. And I'm just concerned that this idea, the idea that we would subsidize people to work less, it just may not be, the timing may be off. I like the idea that people maybe can focus, 4 days a week, they can be more productive, but what we've seen in the last several years is that's not been the case. The last several years is that we've paid people, largely because of the pandemic, to stay home, and they have not gone back to work. And so those 2 points, one about we're subsidizing people to do less, and then also on the piggybacking of we're paying people to stay home, we've not seen them come back to work. So maybe if you can form that into a question and respond. And
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I think I appreciate both questions. I think what we're talking about here is a difference in kind from the issue of paying people, unemployment insurance and staying home. I also reject the premise that people are doing less. I also reject the premise that we're paying people to do anything. We're compensating employers from participating in a study with the state of Maryland. We're not paying workers. They're going to be paid the same. And we don't necessarily think that they're going to be less productive. According to the studies that we have available, I know that may boggle the mind that the idea that people could do more in 32 hours, it's kind of against what we sort of think about the workplace or think about the economy, right? But if you read the studies, a more well-rested worker who has fewer health benefits and who is sick less frequently actually can be and are in companies across the country more productive in 32 hours than they can be in 40 hours. Now, maybe that wouldn't pan out in Maryland, right? Maybe that's just specific to Ireland or specific to Massachusetts. Maybe what happens in Berlin, Germany isn't what happens in Berlin, Maryland, or what happens in Scotland is not the same as what happens in Scotland, Maryland. But we'll know after the end of 5 years because we'll have some data that'll be Maryland specific, and we'll know if what's happened internationally and nationally applies in Maryland. And maybe some of y'all are right. Maybe this will be a huge failure. And if that happens, I'll happily come before the committee again and apologize for wasting everyone's time for 5 years. But I suspect that maybe Maryland is not going to be different. I actually suspect that maybe we'll have very similar results and we're not going to be paying people to stay home or to work less, but actually we're going to be paying businesses a very small amount of money, between $1,000 and $10,000, not a whole lot, to provide a lot of interesting data for us that could help all the workers at businesses who don't transition to a 4-day week, because now we know more about the nature of their Maryland workforce, and maybe they too can one day benefit from shortened hours as well. Now, to your point about the parallel to the unemployment insurance, I just think that it's a totally different ballgame. And I think, as I was saying with Delegate Fisher, if we want to bring some of those folks back into the workforce, some of the people that dropped out with the pandemic, maybe they got a check, maybe that's why they did it, maybe they realized there was more important things in life than working. Who knows what the various rationales were for people. But if we want to bring them out of the shadows and back into the workforce, if that is a goal of this committee and a goal of this General Assembly, I can think of no better way than doing it than passing this bill.
Bad news. You only got one more bill left in front of us.
Bad news for y'all. Bad news for y'all.
I know. All right. That concludes this panel. We still have more favorable. Colleen Jenkins is our last in person from what I can see. And then we have 5 virtual.
Go home and sleep. Thank you so much for coming.
Ms. Jenkins, whenever you're ready, you can start.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for giving me a chance to talk today. My name is Colleen. I am a full-time employee and the mother of a teenager. When my daughter was in elementary school, I felt like I was missing out time with her. It was before school program, school, after school program, and then I got her for dinner, bedtime routine, and there was no extra time. If your school-age child is getting enough sleep, which a lot of them don't, then you really don't see them a whole lot. There was no option for part-time work where I worked, so I decided to take leave without pay, and I worked 32 hours a week, which allowed me to pick up my daughter from school with no after-school program. We would walk home, discussing her day while it was fresh in her mind, and then we'd make dinner together. Unfortunately, this was only possible for me by taking a cut in pay and benefits. What I found interesting was that my productivity stayed nearly the same. I came into the office, worked, and left. People didn't drop by my office as much. There was no coffee hour in the morning. And I didn't look at the clock at 2 p.m. and think, oh, 3 more hours. I thought, oh, I only have an hour and a half left. I better get this done. I went into work happier, with a plan, knowing my day wasn't all work, and feeling a sense of accomplishment when I completed a project in 6 hours instead of 8. I went back to full-time when my daughter went to middle school, in part because of the money and the benefits, and in part due to a stigma of being the only part-time person in my office. And this bill would eliminate those concerns. In short, a 32-hour work week improved my relationship with my child, my mental health, my work-life balance, and had little effect on my performance at work. If I could do the same work for a different company for fewer hours, I would seriously consider it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, we'll go to virtual. We have 3 on right now. First, we'll go to Joe O'Connor. And sir, if you can hear me, start when ready.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you. My name is Joe O'Connor. I'm the director and co-founder of an organization called the Work Time Reduction Center of Excellence. We support other companies to move to reduced hour, productivity-focused working. And previously, I was the CEO of 4 Day Week Global that led the global trials of the 4-day work week over the course of 2022. So the 4-day week seems counterintuitive, but the reality is that it is less about how long you work for and more about the way in which you work. This is something that organizations that I've worked with have described as a forcing function. They've described it as the cheapest and most effective process improvement strategy that they've ever deployed. And why? Because the incentive of the 4-day week for employees is so life-changing that it aligns the interests of the individual employee with the objectives of the business in a way that is more powerful than almost any other policy. And of course, if a business can pull this off, they end up with very significant competitive advantage when it comes to recruitment and retention. So in many modern companies, this idea of Parkinson's law holds true, the idea that a task will expand to fill the time that's available for its completion. So of course, this won't work everywhere, but it will work in more places than you think. I've worked with law firms that have moved from billable hours to fixed fee pricing in order to institute shorter work weeks, or they've found enough inefficiency in their non-billable overheads to maintain their level of billable hours on a shorter work week. I've worked with manufacturing firms who have instituted process efficiencies on the factory floor in order to reduce working time without compromising productivity. And I've worked with retail and customer service businesses who've redesigned their schedules in order to maintain service coverage. In short, this can be done. And this bill offers an opportunity for employers in Maryland. It helps them to de-risk this. It is difficult to be an early adopter. It is difficult to be among the early businesses to take this on. This helps them to, as an incentive, and it offers a reward for them to be able to take that leap. So I'd encourage you to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Chris Meyer.
Thank you, Vice Chair Crosby and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christopher Meyer. I'm a research analyst at the Maryland Center on Economic Policy. We support House Bill 181 because it would open up space for experimentation in work arrangements that can benefit both workers and businesses at a maximum annual cost of about 16 cents per capita. A condensed work schedule gives workers more time to care for their families, take their car to the mechanic, get enough sleep, maybe pursue a hobby. In recent years, we've all heard a lot from business leaders who report that they're struggling to fill vacancies or retain workers. Workers who have time to keep their lives in order, who are well rested, who are happier at their jobs, are also more motivated and more likely to stick around. People who have stayed out of the paid workforce may find that a condensed work week meets their needs better. My employer actually experimented with a 4-day work week in 2022 as a way to help morale amid high inflation. What happened? We trained numerous partners on Maryland's changing budget process. We helped defeat a harmful tax proposal in Baltimore City. We won 4 new grants on top of continuing funding, which I can guarantee at a nonprofit is a competitive process subject to significant uncertainty, not a walk in the park. In short, we had a good year. A coworker said if we made it permanent, she probably will never leave. So if a 4-day work week is such a win-win, why is House Bill 181 needed at all? Can't the market take care of it? The fact is, people are afraid of the unknown. Managers may have mulled the idea of a condensed schedule, but not felt ready to take the plunge. House Bill 181 is just a little boost that will generate data and experience that can inform employers in the future. Thank you, and I respectfully ask for a favorable report.
Thank you, sir. Brian Florido.
Yes, sir. Hi, can you hear me, guys? Good.
Go ahead.
My apologies. Good afternoon, members. As you know, completing the necessities in a household is critical for most folks here in Maryland. Scheduling time off for doctor visits, taking time to complete errands, spending time maintaining a household, and of course, spending time with family and friends. While it comes off as a simple list, the time to complete these things is used up waiting on each other to complete our simple errands, dealing with traffic to go home, and of course, maintaining our home and cleaning. Even so, there is no time for family or friends. We're so busy that we almost don't have time for even that. I grew up remembering my father being so tired from work that he would sleep most of the day on Saturday, and Sunday he would be up to help my mother prepare for Monday. My mother took care of most of the housework, taking us grocery shopping in the weekends because there was no time on the weekdays, helping me with homework and, cooking for dinner. I remember the very few days that my father did have some time off, and when he did, on Saturdays, he would be up spending time with us, his family. I used to work for the electricians union, and I can't tell you how relieving it was when I finally found a job that actually had 40 hours for one project for 4 days. I had the time to help around grocery shopping and had some free time to even spend with friends that I hadn't seen in years. I was able to schedule myself doctor visits to feel without having to feel the less weight of losing a livable wage or losing income in any capacity. Excuse me. The 4-day work week granted me the flexibility to take care of my health, develop myself professionally, and most importantly, focus on those who matter closest to me in my life. Overall, I was relatively happy that I had the flexibility to manage my life without feeling like there was no time. I respectfully urge this committee to return a favorable report on HB 0181. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That concludes the favorable witnesses. We have one unfavorable, Mike O'Halloran.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chairman, member of the House Economic Matters Committee. For the record, Mike O'Halloran here today on behalf of NFIB. Certainly want to acknowledge and appreciate the sponsor's amendment, moving it from 30 to 5 employees. It certainly is very much appreciated and would open it up to more small businesses. But our members still have their concerns. Frankly, I feel like you'd have to forgive them if they worry this pilot program would morph into something a little more nefarious, let's say a mandate. Efforts to incentivize employer-paid leave a few years ago fell flat. Instead, it was a mandate. At the end of the day, small business owners would prefer their tax dollars going towards broader-based solutions like affordable health insurance they can offer employees or lower licensing fees, not hundreds and thousands of dollars going towards what will more than likely be a handful of businesses that choose to take advantage of still this narrowly tailored tax credit. Lastly, after reviewing the bill, the underlying concern from our members is they would still be required to pay an employee for a full week's pay. The goal would be to have the tax credit offset those costs. The details of the tax credit, however, would more than likely fall well short of that, still leaving an employer at a loss. So again, I certainly appreciate, I think, the goals and the intent of providing tax incentives in the effort to move folks along towards a certain goal. But as you've heard from other witnesses, small businesses would prefer to be left alone. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no questions, that concludes this bill hearing and the bill hearings for today. I want to thank our colleagues from Ways and Means. I know Delegate Charles just stepped out and Delegate Wells is here. And thank you all for today. Take care.
Mark, I'm a real estate agent. I appreciate it. Thank you. I appreciate that.